Hi everyone, Antoine Fantoine here. You know who it is. Before we get into this review, I wanted to tell you in this quick little intro that my next few metal reviews are being sponsored by an up-and-coming YouTube channel started by musician and documentary filmmaker Mr. Sam Dunn. The channel is Banger TV, and it features documentaries, uncut interviews with some of the biggest names in metal. So if you are a metal enthusiast, a metal fan, a metalhead, this channel dives into the genre quite deeply. Many different subgenres explored, the mainstream as well as underground artists discussed and featured is the word I want to use. Featured. So you can check out the URL to the channel down there in the description, and it is also listed right here on the screen right now. So check them out. You're the best. The review. Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You know who it is, and thank you for listening to this new episode of the Needle Drop Podcast. Before we get into the show, we want to remind you that this is a listener-supported podcast, which means it exists because of those who support it, and they do so in a few different ways. One, they get weekly downloads of this show via a monthly subscription on our support page. We will link you to it in the description box. Looks like this, button right there. Also, you can hit up our Amazon Associates link, where basically we get a kickback for all purchases you make on Amazon.com when you use this link. Only works in the US though, unfortunately, but you can use it to basically make purchases you were already planning on making on Amazon, and that helps out this podcast as well. Also, you can stream it on YouTube and share it with a friend. All support is appreciated. All right, thank you for listening again, and on with the show. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You know who it is, and in this latest episode of the Needle Drop Podcast, we are going to be having a conversation with fellow YouTuber, music reviewer, music fan, music obsessive, Mr. Ed Vater. And you may know him as the YouTuber InfidelAmsterdam, who is basically the most metal fucking YouTuber that I know of. He's been doing it for, how long have you been doing your channel, and sort of where and sort of when did it start?
I started my channel in 2007. And
so you've been doing this longer than me.
Yeah, but for some reason you're more successful than me, because I checked out your subscribers and I was like, holy shit, this guy's like on 500,000, more than 500,000.
I'm a poptimist. I'm a pop panderer, and I'm just like, I just say popular stuff is great for the views. Dude.
Yeah,
that's just what I'm doing.
Yeah,
that's all I'm doing.
In the end, it's for the viewers and for them to enjoy it and to discover some new music. So that's basically what we do it for. But I started out in 2007, and every once in a while I uploaded a video, and then you get like an email like somebody responded to your video, and I was like, holy shit. And you check out the comment, and it said like, oh, great video, and you're completely proud, and it's kind of cool that you see to which level it evolves if you upload a video and it's being watched 300 times within like a half hour. So
sure,
yeah, that's it's kind of cool how that develops from the start.
So some of your earliest videos, were you sort of doing a lot of reviews? I know a lot of your videos don't tend to have a very formal delivery to them. It's almost as if you're kind of talking to your fans and in a very intimate way. It's kind of more like a metal powwow and an update than it is, you're kind of giving your fans the metal news or something like that. But people really seem to kind of be taken with it, and it seems to have formed a really cool insular community around what you're doing.
Yeah, I also watch some other YouTubers and even the bigger ones, and it seems as if a lot of YouTubers upload videos and are completely distant from the people that are watching it. They never respond to comments, and they keep like a big distance. And I personally think that at least in metal we have this group feeling. We're all brothers and sisters from each other. Also, although that might sound a little bit corny, but I do have that feeling that the viewers are the people that have brought my channel to the level where it's now. So yeah, also when I meet people at concerts and festivals, a lot of people are a little bit afraid to approach me to ask me a question, or like, hey, aren't you InfidelAmsterdam? And I'm like, I'm just a normal guy, and I make my videos for you guys, and I'm always sitting there with a cup of coffee and just, talking away, and I just like to keep it a little bit light and not to, well, how do you say that? To sound a little bit like an authority, I mean, I'm always open for input from people, feedback, and if people say like, hey, you got that wrong, and then, that's just, I think it creates a much more nicer atmosphere than keeping all that distance between you and your viewers.
This is a question I was going to ask later, but I think I might jump into it now because you just mentioned it. The idea of this kind of brotherhood and sisterhood, this community in metal.
Yeah.
What is it exactly you think about metal music or the metal community that kind of fosters that atmosphere?
Well, I think metal has always been the outcast of all the genres out there. You got your rap, and you got hip hop and R&B. And your pop music, and metal has always been the outcast. It never, well, at least not too much, been shown on television. When you hear a song on the radio, it's always something from Metallica, which everybody could enjoy like nothing else matters. And that creates like an atmosphere when you see another metalhead and you go like, hey, that's another guy that listens to metal, and you put up the horns. And the other guy puts up the horns, and it creates like a bond without even having been talking to each other. You know that you listen to a kind of music that's not really popular with great masses. So yeah, I think it's like kind of like motorcycle drivers amongst each other. When they meet each other, they give each other a greeting. I think it's kind of like that. It's we're the outcasts in the music, and I think that's what creates the bond.
I have to agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I mean, somebody who, like me, identifies as somebody who's really obsessive with music, the idea of kind of being very nerdy with music, it's surprising to me that when I do my reviews or when I talk to other people who kind of identify with me and identify with what I'm doing, that they're not just bigger metal fans in general. Because to me, metal, while it is one of the most macho genres, it's also one of the nerdiest genres of music, which is part of the reason I think it's so cool. It's sort of nerdy in the sense that its fans are super passionate about what they're passionate about, and they don't care what other people think about their passion. They're really in it for the art, and they're not in it for sort of what anybody thinks or kind of the social status or anything like that. It's just all about what the music is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the metalheads buy a lot of merchandise, T-shirts and vinyl and CDs, and even the limited items when they're being brought out, boxes with flags in it and patches. And I'm zipping my coffee now from a mug which has Venom on as a picture of it.
They're Venom mugs?
Oh yeah, it says black metal and then Venom with the devil on it. And so yeah, I mean, I'm 36 and I still do that kind of stuff, so just like you say, it's kind of a nerdy genre. There are a lot of people also interested in topics that many people just leave aside, like darker stuff, horror stuff. People dress their houses up in a horror way. I mean, I got skulls all around. I got that big throne standing in my living room, and a lot of people are like, Jesus Christ, who would put that in his house, And then they see what kind of music you listen to, and yeah, it's when I say to people when I visit their houses during my work, like, yeah, I listen to heavy metal, almost 9 out of 10 people are like, yeah, I kind of had a clue, and that that doesn't really happen with I don't want to call people normal or regular, but regular people that say like, I listen to this. I mean, if I see my colleagues and they say like, I listen to Dutch music or I listen to trance, it could go any way, but a lot of metalheads tend to express and to show the world that they listen to heavy metal, and I don't see that happen a lot with other genres, actually.
Yeah, I mean, other music cultures certainly have their own approaches to fashion
Yeah,
and I guess sometimes even decorating their houses or
yeah,
tattoo artists, tattoo and just kind of have a certain way of dressing or handling themselves that
yeah.
so that they can kind of broadcast their tastes and their lifestyle to the world. But probably one of the most recognizable I guess cultural fashion statements in relation to music is most definitely metal.
Yeah, I mean, you can just pick them out within a split second. I mean, you can see a lot of people, and you see people wearing, well, I don't want to call it hip hop clothing because, hey, what do I know about hip hop? But, you see people walking around and they could be listening to any kind of music. But when you see a metalhead walking around, you go like, yeah, that's another one.
Well,
So,
what's kind of interesting about that point about hip hop is
mhm.
that over the past, I want to say, since the 90s and the 2000s and today,
Yeah.
what kind of qualifies as hip hop fashion has changed a lot. I mean, throughout the 2000s, I mean, you had a lot of the baggy clothing,
Oh,
the
yeah.
sports themed clothing, the very baggy jeans, the do rags,
Mhm.
and a lot of that stuff is very out of fashion right now.
Okay.
And right now these days you have a lot of skinny jeans and really like high end name brand shirts and a variety of different things. And a lot of these artists who are still dressing like they're out of the 2000s, it's almost like they're out of date. But
Oh,
the
okay.
thing is, over that same course of time, metal fashion has very much stayed the same. I mean, the denim jackets, the leather
Yeah,
jackets,
with
the
all the patches.
yeah, exactly, the
And
patches, chain wallets, boots, jeans, beards,
yeah,
just all
and if
that
you're
shit.
into, if you're a little bit more known into metal, then you can even pick out the genres that I listen to. I mean, black metal fans wear a leather jacket with spikes on it and long black hair, and well, not all, but it's kind of a stereotype. But every once in a while, you see a stereotypical person that listens to a certain genre. You can pick out the thrashers and the death metal guys and the black metal guys, and even the deathcore guys. You can just pick them out by the clothing that they're wearing. And I think personally that's pretty funny because you kind of think to yourself like, okay, I bet this guy's listening to Creator and all sorts of thrash stuff. And then when he starts talking, he goes like, yeah, my favorite genre is thrash metal. I was like, yeah, see, I was right. It's just kind of funny to watch that from a distance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, over here in Connecticut, we have a pretty deep history in the hardcore scene on the East Coast, and a lot of those hardcore guys, a lot of those metalcore guys. I mean, you could spot them from a mile away.
Exactly.
So kind of going back further into the past, your past, I guess. Obviously, I don't think anybody is born a metalhead. It's very much a choice.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is sort of what was that entry point for you into the genre, and when did you kind of realize that this was a culture that you were a fan of and kind of wanted to be a part of?
Well, it's pretty funny because I went to what you guys would call a high school, and we were in the first class, and there was this small little nerdy guy with glasses, and everybody picked on him, and I was always the bigger guy, the stronger guy. So people tried to mess with me, but I kind of made sure that they didn't do it again. And I became friends with the Outcast back then already. I became friends with him, and he listened to metal before I did. And I always listened to the music that my mom and dad were listening to, like to Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck and stuff like that. And so one day he came to school and he had a tape recorder with him or a tape player. And he told me, like, have you ever listened to this before? And I was like, what's that? And he showed me a tape of the band Venom. And that's why Venom has such a special place for me. And I was like, no, never listened to it. And he put it on. And the first song was black metal. And I was completely sold from the first 2-3 tones. I was like, holy fucking shit, this is some awesome stuff. And from that moment on, he was like, yeah, you should listen to this. And then he came with a Metallica tape and a Slayer tape and an Iron Maiden tape. And those were kind of the bands that got me into it. and I actually kind of picked it up from there. I just listened to those bands, and I discovered more bands, and yeah, we actually became the two only metalheads in that entire school. So yeah, he was actually the guy that got me into metal.
I mean, that's very much how I got into a lot of underground music as well. Just kind of meeting somebody in school who was already into it.
Yeah.
I remember in high school I was very much into a lot of the new metal music that was being played on the radio. But then this friend of mine had turned me on to punk music, and then it just kind of went downhill from there. And and then sort of after kind of realizing which you had already realized, like, oh hey, there's this kind of obscure, cool underground form of music that I hadn't heard of before, and it's kind of opened this new world to me, and it sort of turned me on to this idea that, well, maybe there are other sorts of underground genres as well. So after I had kind of I guess exhausted the punk avenue, I went back and listened to metal, and I went back and listened to a lot of different genres of music, sort of learning more about jazz and hip hop and different forms of popular music. So, since then, I imagine, as a kid, you'd be saving up money for what, cassettes and eventually CDs and so in your collection, which I know is really huge, and you've shown it many times in your videos. I mean, some of those earliest cassettes and CDs that you bought when you were younger and sort of first getting into the genre, do you still have a lot of that stuff now?
I actually, well, the tapes, I got rid of the tapes when the CDs came out, and I still regret it until this day, because these days some tapes are even like worth a lot of money. And
but that's the thing, when you when you're getting into that stuff when you're a kid, you just don't know how much you're going to value it when you're older.
No, I mean,
there's so many CDs that I had when I was younger that I still wish I had now.
Well, I never sold any CDs, actually. I mean, I've been actively collecting for the last 10 years, and before that I just every once in a while bought myself a CD. But I remember that I still have a couple of CDs that I bought back then, which are a lot of money worth right now. And I remember when I just took the CD out of my CD player and threw it on the bed, and if I would see somebody do that now, I would just tear his head off, like, what the fuck are you doing? That's so much worth, just and when you think back, you go like, hey, this really took a weird turn, because some albums I bought for like €1 or €2 or a couple of dollars in your case, and they're worth a couple of hundred now. And I never sold any CDs, but it's a shame that I didn't keep the tapes, although I don't have a tape player actually, but I still do have a few tapes that I bought recently actually. I recently got the first demo tape from the Maltese band Beheaded. And not that I have a tape player, but I was like, I have every CD, so why not tape to get my collection complete? But it's not something that I buy a whole lot, actually. I just stick with vinyl and CDs for the most parts.
What you just said there about that Maltese band kind of leads me to my next question. If there's another thing that kind of grabs me about metal music and just especially in the internet age, it's that it feels like the community has just kind of a very international sense of self. A lot of the metal press, even in the US, consistently champions bands from other countries, whereas in the American music press, when it comes to pop music or hip hop or even indie rock, it seems very Western centric and is rarely, if ever, kind of reaching outside of the borders of the US and Canada or just the English speaking European nations.
Okay.
I wanted to know if you kind of feel that same way. I mean, I find it interesting that we have a band like Ghost, for example, being as big and as successful as they are with American audiences, despite the fact that they're not from the West. It's rare that we have artists within indie pop, for example, sort of hitting it as big, at least these days.
Yeah. Well, I think that metalheads often like to share and promote some more unknown and underground stuff with each other. I mean, I've promoted a lot of bands up till now, and I like to venture out to different kinds of countries. I recently made a video which was called Gym Tunes. There was the music that I have on my phone, which I take to the gym. And I actually went around the world to a couple of countries like Iceland and Poland. And I think that it shows how passionate people are to make metal in the first place, because I even have a band which is called Arsames, if I pronounce that correctly, which is, if I'm not mistaken, from Iran. And some of those countries have like the death penalty if they catch you for making metal, and still those guys kind of risk their lives to create metal, and even good metal. And that is something which a lot of those guys like to do. Like, okay, we know the big guys like Suffocation and Immolation from the USA, and then you have a couple of big bands from the Netherlands, Asphyx and Sinister and whatnot. And I see that more and more people are like, yeah, but have you heard about this band from South America or from India or from China? And it's, a lot of people like to venture out next to all the stuff that we already know. And I think that's a really good thing, actually, because in that way, the more unknown bands and the smaller countries that are not really known for their metal also get a chance to spread their music, because there's some really, really good stuff out there.
As far as a lot of these metal music websites that may be covering artists from outside of the U.S., even though the websites are U.S. based. Given that you are in Europe, is there anything that you could tell us on the outside that you think that we're missing, that is sort of really great over there, that isn't quite making it over the ocean to over here?
You mean in a kind of music way, or in?
Yeah, like in a music sense, sort of any recent bands or albums that maybe have dropped this year, or stuff that you think is older and kind of has not been celebrated as much as you think it should have been.
Well, I think that when you see the lists that people are making of the best bands of this year, and I'm also making a list. People tend to stick to the more known stuff that get more publicity. And I'm always trying to find the more obscure, the more unknown stuff. There's a lot of great old school death metal coming out these days. For example, my number one for this year is still the German band Sulfur Aeon with their new album. And I recently got a new album from the band Lost Soul, which is from Poland. And a lot of people tend to, point out the bigger bands when it comes to a certain country. Like when it comes to Poland, they point out Behemoth or Vader or Decapitated. And I think there's so much more to that. If you just search a little bit better, then, you can get some really great bands that create some awesome music. And I really like the fact that a lot of labels are releasing the older albums that have been produced in the beginning of the 90s. There's a Dutch label which is called Vic Records that has been releasing the first album of Obscenity, Suffocated Truth, which is impossible to find these days if you want to have the original. And then there's For the Security from the band called Carbonized, which he has been releasing. And I think that's a good thing, because there's a lot of bootleg stuff going around with CDs like that. And I think that's one of the things that can't be spread enough when it comes to new releases, but also the older releases of certain labels. The older stuff. I mean, there's some great new stuff coming out. Of course, the new Nihilist is just awesome, and the new Cataclysm. But those are the bands we all know, and I think that that's the whole point of my channel, to point out the smaller guys, just like the Dutch band Body Farm has been releasing a new album. And I think those guys deserve a bigger chance, or not really a bigger chance, but more publicity than the big guys that get it anyway. So, that's...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting that sort of these reissues are coming out to kind of give people a chance to hear these really obscure albums that maybe at one time were just kind of only on tape or bootleg. It's definitely important to appreciate that a lot of these forms of extreme metal that came out in the 90s, I mean, they wouldn't be where they are now if they had not started sort of on that bootleg tape circuit back in the day, because that was the way a lot of these genres were spreading. Because as I guess inclusive as the metal community is now to different styles of metal, when thrash metal kind of reigned supreme, death metal and black metal didn't exactly have an easy start. A lot of people didn't exactly get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I hear a lot of these days as well. When there's a band coming out with a similar sound from one of the earlier bands. I don't know if you heard about the album Savage Land from the band Gruesome, which is kind of like, a lot of people call it a death tribute band, and it has like almost the exact same sound as Leprosy from Death. And a lot of people were disappointed by it because they said, like, yeah, it could be another band, another album of the band Death. And I think to myself, but I don't see anything wrong with that because Death is no more. And what's wrong with a couple of guys carrying the flag, carrying that sound, and just to let people, again, experience the, well, to me, just great sound of the old school death metal sound as it was back then. And I just I think that a lot of people should be a little bit more open-minded when it comes to certain bands that release something new. There are a lot of guys that want to play some old school stuff, and there's a lot of great stuff coming out. But people tend to be a little bit close-minded, stick to the stuff that they know, and are a little bit afraid to venture outside of the stuff that they know. And that's a little bit of a shame, actually.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and that was definitely one of the things I was going to ask you. You know, your thoughts generally on some of these newer groups that aren't necessarily tribute groups, but bands that are making new music, but it sounds exactly like the old stuff. It seems like now that metal has reached a certain age where, you have decade upon decade upon decade of metal in the past to kind of reflect upon. You have people going back and kind of reviving these older sounds.
I mean, there's a band called Rude and a band Morphin, and people were kind of complaining like it doesn't bring anything new. But I personally think that you can evolve in a kind of music up to a certain point. I mean, what more do you want to change to the music to be special and to be new? I just think that there are guys out there that want to create music, and even when it sounds similar to what has already been done, I don't really see a big problem with that. I mean, you don't have to like it, of course, if you don't like the genre at all. But, I think that if you try to change it so much and try to be, special or try to be new, you get stuff like bands such as Rings of Saturn, which to me is really not my kind of music with all the technical stuff in there, which goes way over the top for me. And it's kind of like
I have to totally agree with you. I mean, I personally cannot sit through a Rings of Saturn record either.
No, I mean, I put up one song and after 10 seconds I'm like, Jesus Christ, wait, this is like a Nintendo 8-bit on speed or something like that. I'm like, what the hell? And I mean, it's great if people love it. There are big fans out there of that genre and of that kind of music. But I'm like, I like to stick to the old sound, and you reviewed an album which is Towards the Megalith of Disma, and which is
I know you're a big fan of that record too.
Yeah, I mean, I got like 3 times the vinyl and the CD itself, and I mean, it's just a crushing album. And
it is.
But if you look at the aspect of is it something really, really new? Well, no, but it still makes it a great, great album. And people always want to have new stuff, It's not anything new. Well, no, but it's still a great album, I mean, And it's the same for bands when they bring out a new album. They always have to, for some reason, they have to top their previous album, which I think, if they just keep on going with the sound that I like, they can make 10 albums with the same sound. They don't always have to top it, and they don't always need to change. As long as they make it good, I'm happy. So, yeah.
Do you think the internet age has maybe metal fans and just music fans just in general, like maybe made them a little impatient and kind of, always waiting, always kind of on the edges of their seat for that next new sound and for somebody to kind of push things forward a little bit?
Oh, yeah. I mean, people on the internet are impatient anyway. I mean, when I upload a new video, 2 days later, I get messages like, okay, so when's the next video? I'm like, Jesus Christ, give me a break, And a lot of people rather complain instead of wait, because I think that if a band takes his time or its time to create an album, the more time they take, the better it can become. But I think people are bored really quick. They listen to a new album, they've listened to it a few times, and they start bugging the band when the new album is going to come out.
Sure.
I mean, you have such a great access to all kinds of music, and there where you had to wait for an album to come out and you could only read it in a magazine, you went to the store and you picked up the album and you shared it with your friends like, hey, there's a new album out, and that was the thing for at least a couple of months. But now people listen to the album before it's even out, and they get bored with it before it's out. So yeah, I think it's a great thing, the internet, but it makes people impatient and quickly bored. So that's a little bit of shame, actually.
Yeah. Talking about some of these newer bands that are playing with older sounds, I mean, simultaneously, the internet has also allowed for a lot of groups that I think probably would have fallen into obscurity eventually, even though they had some successful records in the past, to kind of continue putting out albums. And you've already said that, you don't mind and you actually like the idea that there are bands out there that are sort of, reliving the sounds of like Death's Leprosy.
Yeah.
But, are you personally like looking forward to when, let's say, Cannibal Corpse or Autopsy come out with a new record?
Oh, I absolutely do. There are many people that stick with the older albums of a certain band. I've seen comments of people commenting on the new album of Cannibal Corpse, or the most recent one, the Skeletal Domain, and people are like, it's something so different compared to Eat 'Em Back Alive, and I'm like, yeah, well, of course, these people get older and they want to innovate just a little bit. So yeah, it's of course it's different, but I look at each album separately. I mean, yesterday there was a guy asking me, do you still hate the Black Dahlia Murder? And I was like, I never hate a band. There's just a chance that I don't like their music. And the first few albums of the Black Dahlia Murder were really not my thing. And then I listened to Everlast and I was like, okay, this is really not bad. But yeah, even when the great guys like Autopsy and Immolation and Cannibal Corpse come out with a new album, or Carcass with Surgical Steel, I really, really like to listen to the album, but I'm somebody that waits until it's out and gets myself a CD or a vinyl. I might listen to one song online just to get an idea of what they've been making, and if I like it, I'll just get the album. But yeah, even the bigger ones are still on my list.
Yeah, you're old school.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as old school as it gets.
I kind of had a moment like that the other day where it was kind of odd with, I hate to bring this up in the middle of a discussion about metal, but the new Adele album. Okay. and how her and her label decided that they were not going to be doing any streaming, no early leaks or anything like that. Okay. You have to buy the record, and when it comes out, it comes out. And it was like, hey, I haven't had to wait for an album to actually come out for a while now. And it's just kind of weird, and it's just so funny to sort of see people who have sort of grown up never having known that, sort of reacting to it in a very negative way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are being used to, they are used to be able to listen to an album before it's even out, and I'm like, that for me spoils the whole surprise about an album a bit. Just like I said, I'm just going to listen to one song and then I get a really good idea of what they've been creating for this album. And then I'll just buy it and I put myself a cup of coffee and I sit back and I listen to the album and I'm like, okay, this is some really good shit. And I think that brings a little bit back the magic of buying music. You know, if it's so easy accessible, it kind of spoils that entire part. I remember when I was going to the record stores, and I just picked out a pile of 10 CDs, and I went to the counter, and I just stood there for 2-3 hours, just listening to albums. And you know, it wasn't accessible on the internet, and that was just such a charming way to listen to music and to discover new music. Although it's great because you can share it with people, like, hey, you know, just listen to this. Still, that part, going to the record store and to discover and to just be to be busy with music like that, that was my favorite part of listening to the music, and the collecting part. Actually, that's kind of the thing that internet has spoiled, although it has its advantages, you know, so you can listen to a song. But yeah, I kind of miss that, actually.
Yeah, and in a way, it sort of spoils the communal aspect of releases as well, because albums coming out feel less and less like events.
Yeah.
Since there are so many albums coming out one after another, and everybody kind of just listening to the record at their leisure, sort of just illegally downloading it off the internet or something. It just kind of feels like very isolated.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been talking to people and asking them, like, hey, are you going to wait for the new Cannibal Corpse, or are you going to wait for the new Belphegor? And they're like, well, I already listened to it. I was like, what do you mean you already listened to it? Well, you know, yeah, I downloaded it somewhere, and they wanted to send me the link. I was like, no, I don't need to listen to it. I just wait for a song to come online, and then I'll listen to it. Then I'll just buy the album, you know, just to be waiting for something, and to have it as a kind of a surprise. I mean, if you've listened to the album and you get it in your hands, you go like, yeah, well, you know, I already know this. So it's I mean, I love to discover an album and to put it on, and then to go through the booklet and to watch the artwork, and you know, just to have it as an experience to listen to the album. People just throw it on their iPod and don't really get into the music anymore. You know, it's kind of like a secondary thing. Like, yeah, we'll just download the album. Sounds good. I'm gonna throw it on my iPod. And yeah, I just, from a hobby perspective, I'm like, I love to discover the music while I have it in my hands. You know, that's a lot. I think it's a lot nicer to be able to work with music like that.
Going back to a point that you made, sort of about Rings of Saturn. I mean, this is something that I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
It seems like metal music in general is sort of a lot of the time based on some kind of extremity of some sort, you know, extreme technicality, extreme brutality.
Yeah.
Do you feel like right now metal has kind of reached a bit of a threshold of extremity? Like, obviously, you know, you personally have a taste threshold. There are albums that can get too technical, in your opinion. But, you know, do you feel like we can really kind of push it past the point that we're at now, or at least some of these bands are at now? And if so, you know, is pushing it past this point even really necessary? Is that going to advance the genre or make the music any better at this point?
I personally think that the more they put all the technicality in there, the more boring it becomes. You know, it's kind of like a contest who has the more technical stuff in their music. And I also think that is the reason why a lot of guys out there are kind of fed up with it, because that's kind of how it looks, and want to create that old sound again. I do like some technical death metal every once in a while, like Necrophagus. I got their 2 albums, and there's a band Ophidian Eye from Iceland, which is pretty technical, but they don't overdo it. And I'm like, you know, if you keep it on like this, it's fine. But a band such as Deeds of Flesh, who were, well, just brutal death metal in the beginning of their days, their latest album, Portal to Canaan, was just really over the top for me. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, you know, not one of those bands again. You know, they were just so good, and then they evolved into this guitar wanker shit, and I was like, no, this is just... And I think if they push it even further, it's getting worse actually. So yeah, that's why I like the old sound being relived through the guys that are creating it.
So you like some of these older sounds, but also what's your take on some of these groups? Because obviously some people have reacted to this extreme technicality by going back to the old school, but some people have reacted to it by experimenting more with sound than sort of technical ability and just kind of musicality, experimenting with noise and electronics and stuff like that, like bands such as Altar of Plagues, for example.
Okay.
I mean, or even the band Indian, and there are a lot of other groups that are sort of slipping my mind at the moment. I mean, sort of what's your take on going down that direction? And some of these newer black metal acts as well, kind of really experimenting with noise and just kind of working on making their music more abrasive and more textured, you know, and kind of drifting away from just simply having guitars be the star of the show.
What I do like with bands like that is a band such as Flesh God Apocalypse that adds a lot of classical music in there. Well, you're either a fan of it or you just really hate it. There are a lot of people that just don't like classical music, and they even put more classical music in their most recent albums. And there were a few people that said, like, well, you know, they get too classical. There's also a release from a band called Neolith, and I can't pronounce the name because it's just in a sort of different alien language. They also use sound effects and voices, like opera voices in there, which to me adds a great atmosphere to the metal, which is already really atmospheric and dark. I do like that kind of stuff, actually. I think that if they experience or experiment with it, and it creates something which creates a great atmosphere, just like the project of the guys from Cataclysm, which is called XDO, which has, well, kind of like a Roman atmosphere, because it's also about the old Roman Empire. Nile, for example, you know, it's really fucked up, extreme, and still you hear these ancient Egypt sounds in there, which to me is just great. But that's, if they create a great project with that and it sounds good, then I'm a really big fan of that.
Have you heard, this is just kind of a bit of a detour, have you heard the band Psy? Have you listened to Psy?
No,
they're this Japanese metal band, and they're kind of very wacky, technical, and left field, like the band Rings of Saturn. But the vocals are even more off the wall, and I find them hard to listen to as well. But the thing is, sometimes you hear that stuff and it's not so much it's technical, but it's also very experimental and nothing that you would expect. And as much as I don't like it, I just have to kind of nod my head at it and be like, yeah, this is the the craziest shit I've ever heard today.
I think that I mean, I also have been a lot younger, and when I listened to metal, it had to sound like metal. You know, you had to have the original sound, the drums and the growling and the guitar riffs. And you know, when I got older, I was like, well, when I was younger and I listened to something that was completely different, or the guys that were experimenting, I was like, this is crap after like 2-3 seconds. And I'm more these days like, okay, I'm just gonna listen to it and I'm just gonna let it, you know, sink in, and I'm just gonna give it a chance. And that is how I discovered a lot of bands which at first I was like, okay, this is really crappy, and then I gave it another chance and another chance, and I was like, okay, this is actually really, really good. That's one of the most known examples was actually Rammstein. And when I first heard it, I was like, you know, those German vocals and German lyrics, I was like, yeah, fuck this shit. I don't speak German. I hardly understand it. So yeah, let's not. And I mean, I now have 3 or 4 CDs from them, and I think they're really good. I've seen them live 3 times. So yeah, I like to give it a chance more, because if you don't, you're gonna miss a lot of great stuff out there. I used to listen to Triptykon in the beginning, and I was like, Jesus Christ, what is this? And I now have both their albums. I just gave it another chance, and I was like, okay, let's just really listen to what these guys are doing. And then you just find out that it's just awesome and great, genius stuff. I just love Triptychon now.
Yeah, there were a lot of metal records that were incredibly popular on the radio over here during the late 90s and the 2000s that when I was younger I got into them. I had the CDs, but as I grew older I just sort of assumed that I'm not really into this anymore. This isn't what I'm listening to anymore. You know, there's no way that this is still going to appeal to me. But going back to a lot of those records, there are at least some of them that I still think are great and are good albums. And Rammstein is definitely one of those bands. Also Pantera, Metallica as well, of course. But they're kind of Metallica sort of reached this almost classic rock status at this point. It's like they've kind of crossed over, and just kind of general rock fans love the hell out of them. I also, to this day, I still kind of swear by. I think System of a Down had some great music as well, especially when they first came out. What's another band that I love Rage Against the Machine to death as well. They're kind of a blend of different stuff. But Rammstein is definitely one of those bands that, looking back on them, even though they might have seemed kind of like maybe a bit of a one-hit wonder to some people. I mean, I caught them live too, and I think a lot of their early stuff is great. Yeah, I mean,
I recently posted a picture on my Instagram of the Slipknot CDs that I had. And just to mess with people a little bit, I mean, I still like the music. It's one of the bands that I've discovered like years ago. And every once in a while I put on a CD and I'm like, I still remember why I like this, and I still do. And a lot of people tend to diss out the stuff that they started with, as if it's shameful to still listen to the stuff that you started out with. There are people that say like, well, I started off with Iron Maiden, but I listen to Cannibal Corpse these days. And I'm like, no, I still have Iron Maiden of probably every CD by now. But I think it's great to look back at the bands and the albums that you started out with, such as Venom. And some people are like, Venom never were really good. And of course, it wasn't really technical or brutal in any way. But they started out with a certain atmosphere and certain lyrics, and I think it's great to step back a little bit every once in a while into your memory and think like, okay, hey, this is what I've not been listening to for quite a while. So, and I just wanted to see the reactions of people because, of course, Slipknot has this, how do you say that? It's kind of like a status. People love him or people absolutely fucking hate him. And there were a few reactions that were like, you and Slipknot, why? And I was like, well, because they make music, which I do like, and people are making it so difficult and making so much trouble out of music. And I'm like, just let people listen to what they like to listen to. And, everybody has bands that other people don't like. But I'm some people are ashamed to admit that they've listened to certain bands. I recently posted a picture of an album which I have of Bob Marley, and people are like, Bob Marley, really? I'm like, good music is good music, so it doesn't matter when you bought it and when you were listening to it. It's still a part of you, and that's what you started out with.
Yeah, I mean, I used to love the shit out of Slipknot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I think some people might. And I know that there are some metalheads that listened to them as well when they were popular, and they still stick by them.
Yeah.
At least some of the older stuff, and I hear they still perform really well.
Yeah.
But I think some people sort of, I don't know, wince or sort of reel back when they hear a name like Slipknot, or they hear that somebody is listening to Slipknot, because to them, it's probably reflective of a time when they didn't know as much about metal as they knew now.
Yeah.
Because when I was younger, I mean, there was certainly a point in time when I heard Slipknot where I was like, this is the most brutal shit I've ever heard.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a time when I thought fucking 6 Feet Under was like the most brutal death metal band ever. You know what I mean? But I mean, later down the road, you hear other artists and you hear other records, and you learn that that's not the case at all. And I think some people, I don't know, I think some people feel lied to when that sort of happens, and as a result, they're like, oh, I don't listen to that Slipknot shit anymore. I found harder, more brutal stuff. I found the real shit. Whereas, like, I don't know, it's still not that bad in terms of metal music.
No, I mean, it's as if it's. I even made a video about this a pretty while ago, which a lot of people misunderstood completely. I met an old friend in the streets, and we started talking, and he was really deep into metal when we were hanging around, and we were in our midst of 20s, and I started out, well, I was already a metalhead, and then he started to listen to it, and he was a big fan of Metallica all of a sudden, and he changed his entire look into a metal look, and I was like, that's not you, but if that's what you want to do, then go ahead. And I met him, and he was walking around in a 3-piece suit and short hair and everything, and which is a choice he makes. I mean, that's just fine. I mean, we all get jobs, and we all get different people we hang around with, but I asked him, do you still listen to metal? And which might be a strange question because do you still listen to metal? But I kind of knew the answer that I was getting. And he told me, no, that's something you do when you're younger. And I was standing there in my 30s with my Cannibal Corpse shirt on. I was like, all right,
Sure.
I don't know. And I was like, okay, your taste evolves and it changes, and you get other music to listen to. I recently, well, a couple of months ago, I bought an album, the first album of Daft Punk, which I just think is an awesome album. And
you're talking about Homework?
Yeah, Homework. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great record.
Yeah, and you change and your taste changes, but I can't imagine that if you're so into something and you're such a fan and you buy records, that for some reason you reach an age where you let all that stuff go and think to yourself, well, that was something I did when I was younger. And I'm like, well, you don't have to be as passionate in it as everybody else or as me, but how does it change from standing in front of a concert with your horns up into walking around in a 3-piece suit and telling other people like, yeah, that's just it's a rebel kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, yeah.
I think that sort of thing is kind of universal for a lot of music fans. It seems like it seems like music is, for a lot of people, just merely an outlet for them during a certain time in their life.
Yeah.
And then maybe when they don't need that outlet anymore, they kind of grow out of music because they weren't really as much into the music as much as they were into the outlet it provided.
Yeah.
And the people who were really there for the music from the beginning kind of stick with it into older age.
Yeah. I mean, I always say, like, the older I get, the more passionate I get about it, actually.
Sure.
I mean, just like I said in the beginning, when I started out with metal, I bought the shirts and I bought my army boots and army pants. And I every once in a while bought a CD, and nowadays I just buy like as many as I can, and that's how my CD collection grew out to be the size that it is now. I think the last 5-6 years have been actually the most passionate when it comes to buying music and to listening to music. And of course, when I started with my YouTube channel, I actually didn't started it to review bands or to, I don't know, to really talk about the music. I just wanted to make a video and to show off some CDs that I bought. And then some people were giving me feedback like, hey, why don't you do a CD review? And so, yeah, I think that just like you say, for some people, it's kind of like a phase thing, as in, I need this right now, but I don't need it anymore. But yeah, I also kind of like think to myself, it's kind of a taste, and you don't have to let it go. But yeah, it's strange how it changes for some people. Yeah, it's hard to explain, but it's
all right.
Yeah.
A couple more questions to close out. I wanted to ask you, as the longtime metal fan you are, and sort of talking earlier about what records and what artists you started with, often I get the question, where exactly should I start with metal music? Because to an outsider, it can be daunting or sort of, maybe even scary to somebody when they're trying to get into a new band and that new band has 30 records or so. Which one do I even listen to first? And with metal, to an outsider, I assume it could probably be even scarier, especially if you're first venturing into some of that harder, more aggressive stuff, and some of that stuff. I mean, even myself, I didn't really appreciate it until exactly I knew where it was coming from stylistically and sort of what bands were influencing those bands, and then from there I could kind of gradually evolve into those harder records and see where those artists were kind of getting their inspiration. Would you right off the bat recommend starting with maybe some of these death metal bands, some of these black metal bands, or going back to the past and listening to your Iron Maidens and your Slayers and your Judas Priests and all that?
Well, I get that question a lot from people. They send me messages on Instagram and Facebook and in the comments on YouTube.
Sure.
They tell me I'm in metal not for too long, and I'm trying to venture out and to get into death metal, and can you recommend me a few bands or albums? And I mostly ask them okay, what have you already been discovering so far, so I can get a picture of what they're listening to and what they're liking. And some people send me messages I like Rings of Saturn and the more technical stuff. So then I just ask them okay, listen to this song, a very groovy song of Bull Thrower or Blood Mortize, which is more old school. And then they send me a message back holy shit, this is some really good stuff, and I like the raspy and buzzsaw guitar tone. So then I can just pick it up from there and tell them okay, so this is a band called Cannibal Corpse and this is more like this. Of course you can't answer everybody. I mean, I get a ton of questions every day, but every now and then I just sit behind my computer and I'm okay, let's see what this guy listens to. Do you also like black metal? And then they go well, I've never listened to black metal before, and then I start off with Immortal or some Dark Funeral or even Dimmu Borgir, their earlier stuff. And it's great to be able to show people some extra music and to let them know about different kinds of genres. There was this guy that kept on sending me messages okay, so now I like black metal too, but how about some thrash metal? And I just sent him 5 or 6 links of bands that have been making music in the past of thrash metal and a few new ones. And I told him you can really see the difference between the older stuff and the newer stuff. And I think if it's if they already like metal, then they should just tell you okay, I listen to this. And a lot of these newer, younger kids actually don't really like the older stuff like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Venom, and they just want to have the more extreme stuff, which I think also comes a little bit from the attitude that it has. It sounds brutal, and it's they look angry, and and they try to scare people with their looks and with their music. And I think that they don't really find that with the older stuff anymore, which of course sounds really light when you compare it to the newer bands. I mean, if you put on a Iron Maiden record or you put on a Immolation record, there's a huge difference in sound. And I think they really want to express their attitude, look at me being a badass metalhead in their music. And I think that I don't really find that with their older stuff.
Yeah, but it's definitely important to note that for its time it was brutal.
Yeah.
But the thing is, brutality has sort of changed over the years.
Oh yeah.
And I guess that sort of excuse me. I guess that sort of leads me to to ask about sort of brutality, about I guess shock in metal music, which has been a very important element to metal music as far as how people view it culturally over the years. And do you think metal music these days, I mean, you know, you're talking earlier about how the way you dress, the way you handle yourself, people can sort of guess from afar that you're into metal music. But do you think the general population is as shocked by metal as they used to be, and if they aren't, is that shock value important to the existence of the genre? Does metal music need shock to be what it is?
I think the shock element separates the music from all the other music. I think it's been played now, of course. You know, I mean, the whole Satanism thing and the horror thing, but I think that it doesn't really need it, but it's become a part of it. You know, I mean, if you see an album art which is completely horrific, I can imagine that in the beginning of the 80s and the midst of the 80s, people were like, holy fucking shit, and album covers got banned, bands got banned from countries to play there, and that has changed into mainstream people looking at it like, yeah, you guys are all Satanists, you all wear black. Fine, we know it.
Yeah, it's another pile of corpses on a record. Who gives a shit?
It all sounds like shit, and we know it, you know. And I don't really think that a lot of people are actually shocked by now. I mean, I was wearing a beanie which had dying fetus put on it in the logo, and there was an elderly woman. I think she was around 60, and she was like, hey, what's on your beanie? Does it say like dying fetus? And I was like, yeah. Huh, what's that? I was like, okay, it's a band, you know, it's heavy metal. And she was like, oh, okay, like that noisy music. I was like, yeah, that's it. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And she just walked off, and I was like, okay, shit, you know, just
you have never felt so unbrutal.
Yeah, I was like, all right.
You just got shrugged off by a sweet little old lady.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I remember when I was standing in a club, and I don't know how I wind up there. I do know. I was a bouncer for a while, and I was wearing a dark funeral shirt, which said on the back, "Only death is real." And there was this woman coming up to me, and she was like, "Yeah, do you know that shirt of you is really offensive?" I was like, and you know, you get a little bit proud, and you go like, "Oh, here we go." And she was like, yeah, you know, I buried my sister like 2-3 days ago. And I was like, yeah, great. This is a nice conversation to have in a club, you know. and I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. And she was like, why are you wearing such a shirt? And I was like, well, to have conversations like this. I was like, no, I just like this kind of music. And yeah, you know, it's just a phrase that they use, and it's not to be taken that serious, you know, just don't get your pants in a twist. And she just kept on going. I was like, okay, I really need to get the fuck out of here, because, yeah, you know, this is just not cool. But, I mean, if you're younger, you kind of like those reactions from people, like when they're really shocked. And these days, when I'm walking around, the people are like, oh, that's so offensive, and it says dying fetus. I'm like, yeah, cool. You know, I just, yeah, you know, you had the discussions, you had the arguments from people, and you know what they're going to say, you know how they react, and I'm like, yeah, you know, just keep on walking. So, yeah, I don't think that metal really needs it, but it became a part that's unattachable from the music itself. You know, people just use it. Yeah, I think it's also kind of a selling point, because a lot of people do like the gruesome stuff that's been pictured on the albums, and to express that attitude, like, look at me being brutal. And I'm like, yeah, I had that period as well, you know. Just
I mean, in a way, it kind of keeps it kind of insulates the music from the opinions of other people who would otherwise kind of just stay away from it because of that imagery.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they might not be shocked by it, but the moment they see it, they're like, okay, I have no interest in this.
Yeah, that's something I also said in one of my older videos. There's this top 2000 going on in the Netherlands right now. It's around Christmas, and they played the most known 2000 songs on the radio, and there are a few metal songs in that list, and you can vote for it. And when it gets the most voted, then it's going to be aired on the radio. And people are sending each other the links like, yeah, you should vote for Iron Maiden, you should vote for Slayer and Metallica. And I'm like, let's not put it on the mainstream radio. I mean, not that people aren't allowed to listen to it or to enjoy it, but yeah, you kind of want to keep it for the people that genuinely appreciate it. I at least don't want to be standing next to a guy sipping from a Bacardi Breezer with a little dot on his head, and a little hipster beard, or sipping from a Starbucks coffee, while watching Cannibal Corpse. And you go like, okay, that, yeah, that kind of fucks up the atmosphere, And a lot of people want to spread it, or are kind of angry that metal is not being shown on television, or it's not being aired on the radio. And I'm like, let's just keep it like that. We never really needed television or radio. We spread the music amongst ourselves. We gave each other tapes to listen to, and we told each other about new bands and about new albums. And that's the way it always has been. And I think that's the charm of this genre, actually, that it gets spread by the actual fans. And I think that also makes people an actual fan, because they really discover it. It's not being thrown in their faces. Metal is never being used in advertisements or commercials. And yeah, in that way, you really get the chance to experience the music as it is, instead of being beaten down with it if you hear it like every 10 seconds on the radio.
Sure. I think we're gonna leave it at that. Again, I want to thank Ed Vater for coming on. I will drop his YouTube channel down in the description. You guys can check out his vlogs, his discussion topics about various metal bands. But please do not ask him about cattle decapitation. That will make him very angry. And you probably won't like the answer that you get. So just avoid all other, just avoid that topic.
I've been talking about that enough by now. And still people ask me, like, what do you think of cattle decapitation? I'm like, Jesus Christ, just watch this fucking videos, So, but it's been my pleasure, man. I was really honored to be asked for this. So,
no problem. Just keep on making videos and I'll keep checking them out.
Yeah, same for me, man.